Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and we are joined by Marcel Rodarte. He is a member of the City Council in Norwalk, a nice-sized city, over 100,000 people, and no doubt all 100,000 of you are a little concerned about water.
Absolutely.
And I want to get a sense from you, as someone who's lived in the community for some time, how are the residents of Norwalk doing in the face of the drought?
Well, I think we're doing pretty good. We put some, the state a while back asked us to start reducing our water usage, and so our residents have done a great job at that. But now there's some mandatory restrictions that are coming out. They haven't been finalized yet, but once they do, the city of Norwalk is being asked to reduce our water likely by about 20% or so.
And let's talk about that, because based upon what we know in terms of the State Water Board, they set various levels. The cities must cut either by 8%, 12%, 16%, 20%, 24, 28, 32, 36.
Right.
Many levels. If you are being asked to cut at the 8% level, it means you've done pretty well already. If you're being asked at 36% level, you haven't done very well. Norwalk's coming in around 20%, which means that Norwalk clearly has taken steps in the past, before these mandatory restrictions came down, that are working. Remember, the target is 25%.
Right.
So that means you're doing something already because you are below that 25%.
Right.
So what's gone right, sir?
Well, I think part of it is available water. You know, we're fortunate to live in an area where we have a pretty decent groundwater supply. So we don't rely on imported water as much, but it's more than just the cities. It's the water purveyors that are being required to reduce. So, you know, our Norwalk municipal water system only covers probably about a third of our city. So we have two other private companies, and by reducing the water usage overall through the state of California, where water isn't as readily available, that's how we're going to try to get ourselves through this drought.
So how are your residents doing? You know, is it that you have a lot of apartment buildings, so as a result, water usage is just not that high because there aren't as many green lawns, or what's the mix in your city?
Well, I would say when it comes to private companies, private water purveyors, it's cost. I mean, they make it cost prohibitive. Private water companies are allowed to use tiered pricing, whereas there was just a ruling just the other day came out, whereas municipal government water providers were not allowed to do that.
And let's talk about that. I'm glad you brought it up. As we know, the city of San Juan Capistrano was the subject of the lawsuit, and in that city, the governmental water agency was charging more if you used more.
Right.
And what the court said is under Proposition 218, if you are charging more, it has to be for an actual cost. It can't just be a penalty per se.
Right.
And so San Juan Capistrano can no longer engage in that practice. But you said it. Private entities that may be purveying water, they're not covered by Prop 218.
Absolutely. Well, they are covered by Prop 218 when they want to do rate increases, but they're not subject to the same laws that we are.
But they can engage in the tiers, I understand.
Absolutely.
So did you say that 2/3 of your city gets water through private entities and 1/3? So that's tricky, sir. I mean, how does one incentivize using less water if you can't use the stick of higher rates?
Well, for us as a city, it's awareness. That's the huge thing. You know, folks know that water is expensive. I get complaints on Facebook, social media all the time about water being so expensive. Actually, I get complaints from our residents asking what we're doing to why our water is more expensive than, say, Downey's water. And the reason is because we do rely on imported water to some extent. All of our water doesn't come from the ground, so imported water is incredibly expensive. And so the best thing we can do is to let our residents know that it is important to save water. You know, the state has asked the local agencies to enforce these rules, but we just don't have the staff.
And let's talk about enforcement, because that obviously is the next level.
Yes.
We remember last year, Governor Brown asked for a voluntary decrease in water use by 20% and gave agencies the ability to fine about, I guess, $500 a day or whatever it was. Virtually no agency was fining. I think Santa Cruz was maybe the one agency that was fining. Now, with the 25% mandatory reduction overall as a target, we know that water agencies can be fined $10,000 a day if they don't meet their targets.
Correct.
So cities like Beverly Hills, for example, who's at the 36% level, they're ready to fine $1,000 a day.
Right.
but they probably have more enforcement tools. What about Norwalk?
Yeah, it comes down to staff, manpower, the ability to enforce. Now, can you imagine how difficult it would be to go out in somebody's yard and see whether or not they watered more than 3 times a week? There's easy things to catch. Somebody watering down a driveway, a business watering down a driveway or a parking lot. Those types of things are fairly easy to catch. But again, it comes down to how do you enforce that? If they're doing it in the middle of the night, we just don't have the staff to do that. Our budgets are tight as they are.
But is now the 1/3 that is City of Norwalk public water, is that who owns that department? Is it like the Norwalk Water Department? Or?
Right, it's a Norwalk water system. It's a utility under the city.
Okay.
We have staff that does that. So again, so the staff time would have to come from that water, which may affect rates as well. As you said with the Prop 218, we can only charge for what it costs to provide those services.
What happens if, for whatever horrible reason, the state water board says, Norwalk Water Department, you didn't meet your goal, we're fining you $10,000 a day? I mean, do you then need to start putting resources towards enforcement to collect the $10,000 a day?
Yeah, I don't think we would let it to get to that point. I mean, our number one goal as a council is to make sure that we don't incur those types of fines, avoidable fines. So we would find a way to enforce what we needed to do. But a lot of the water savings are going to come from I know there's some mandates that we cannot water medians, but there's some vague language.
And let me ask you about that, because for example, we're at Cal State Long Beach today, which is where our bureau is, and I noticed outside they've stripped some grass from where it's a CSULB, kind of a nice statue or something. It's a CSULB, an piece of art. The grass is gone.
Right.
So it's clear to me that's an example of stripping medians.
Correct.
That takes time and money and resources. Is that happening in Norwalk, for example, where they're stripping away grass from medians or whatever it may be?
Well, we haven't got to that point yet, and one of the issues is the language isn't clear yet. So as soon as the state clarifies that language, because it says ornamental landscaping.
Right.
So
what
now,
is ornamental?
Is that grass? Is that bushes? Is it we don't know what that is yet. So we're waiting on some clarification with that. But one of the things that we are doing as we go forward with median projects, we have one that's going down Pioneer Boulevard right now. Those projects will include obviously drought tolerant landscaping and those types of things.
And let me ask you about rebates. You surely know that the MWD, Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, is offering incredibly generous rebates for those that will put in artificial turf, looking at drought-tolerant plants as well. And I'm not sure about Norwalk Water or the private entities are oftentimes matching those rebates. So are Norwalk residents looking at that? Maybe we should start putting in artificial turf, or is it still cost prohibitive and difficult?
It is for some folks, but I mean, when you look at the long-term savings, from having to pay for water, that's getting incredibly expensive. One of the things that we've just done recently, actually, Brad, is we've started instituting our municipal code didn't allow for artificial turf and front yards and that type of thing.
I was reading actually in today's paper that there had been a law, or I'm not sure if it was either there had been a law or they needed to pass a law to prevent folks from homeowners associations from finding those that don't water their lawns.
Right.
So I mean, that's part of the issue.
Absolutely. So I mean, it's sort of it's a fine line between the enforcement, or for folks you want your cities to look nice. You want obviously the property values are impacted when everybody on the street has a brown yard.
But is it becoming kind of hip and cool and cachet to have a brown lawn or have cacti on your front yard?
Well, I think more drought tolerant landscaping, and even this fake turf, because I mean there's stuff out there now that looks exactly like real grass and it'll last you 10 or 15 years.
And I noticed sometimes it was getting hot because my wife and I looked at it, but then I understand now there is turf that won't feel hot to the touch. And I want to thank you so much for joining us. I hope you come back. His name is Marcel Rodarte. He is a member of the City Council in the beautiful city of Norwalk, California. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter California Edition.